Thank you. Nothing like being located in downtown Lansing and being picketed by several thousand angry demonstrators. Yes, not everyone appreciated our position on that issue. But we prevailed because it was the right thing to do. When Indiana became the 23rd right-to-work state, all of a sudden a philosophical issue became a practical challenge and a real question of our economic competitiveness with a nearby state. I know there are folks here from Indiana in the hotel. They're good neighbors, and I have some good friends who live and work in Indiana, but they are tough competitors for jobs. Part of our message to you as a candidate for office is that you need to understand that economic competitiveness is a process of continuous improvement. It is not a destination. It's not a hotel that you can drive to and check in and stay for a while. These days, every time we work to pass legislation that encourages job creation and economic growth, chamber executives in other states call. We went years and years and no one called to say, gosh, that was a really bad bill. How'd you do that? Can we have a copy? But now that Michigan is working again, because of you and what you do at the local level, because of better leadership at the state level, we get calls every day. How did you make progress on personal property tax relief? How did you become a right-to-work state? How did you move forward with unemployment insurance and workers' compensation reform? The challenge is that those other states don't just copy the good legislation, they make it better. They do it better, quicker, faster, smarter. And so we're now in a position where, as the Great Lakes state, we're moving forward. We started with Northwood University 4 years ago. Every year we do an annual report on Michigan's economic competitiveness. 4 years ago, when we did the first report, we created an econometric model. We looked at Michigan and all of the other states in the country, right to work, not right to work, nationally, and then in the Great Lakes. The first report showed us that we were 47th in the country. It was my job to come up with a catchy headline for that first report. When I got the news, Dr. Tim Nash, who did the report with us, said, well, the good news is, we're not the worst. And so the first catchy title I had was sort of, thank you, Illinois, hooray, we stink, it could have been worse. But in a week or two, once we finalize the next edition of the report, you'll see that we went from 47th into the mid-30s. And we'll be announcing in a couple of weeks that we're now 29th. A few years ago, I used to run 5K and 10K races. When I first started running those races, my goal was not to die of a heart attack before the finish line. Then as I got better and more competitive, it was to finish the race. Then it was to beat that fat guy who was in the race, the person who was fatter than I was. And I got to the middle of the pack and felt pretty good, but you don't win the race from 29th or 25th. And so being economically competitive, playing a leadership role in the legislative process is always about moving forward with vision and courage and to work to lift up each other. There are very few social problems that face Michigan's families that wouldn't be made better if more people had good jobs. The best way to guarantee, as conservatives, that there's adequate revenue to fund K through 12 education and local government and state government is to have more taxpayers. I think sometimes people don't understand that, especially in Washington, D.C., but in Lansing as well. So our process is for you as a candidate to be invited to participate. No questionnaire, no interview. And I'll talk a little bit about the two races I mentioned earlier and how we ended up where we're at. No interview, no endorsement. At the Michigan Chamber, if you're involved in an open seat campaign, you'll be invited to submit a questionnaire. If you don't submit a questionnaire, or if you choose not to respond, end of process. And we understand that not everyone wants the support of the Michigan Chamber. If you would like our support, we'll evaluate the questionnaire. You'd be surprised sometimes what you learn in questionnaires. Most people are very straightforward. We've got a bit of a challenge recently with people who turn the questionnaire over to their consultant or campaign manager. We say to you as candidates, you expect us to honor our commitments. Please take the time to fill out this questionnaire yourself, because if you say this is where you stand on this issue or that issue, and we support you and you win, we expect you to follow through on those commitments, the same way you expect us to follow through on our commitments. So we go through the interview process. At the Michigan Chamber, important decisions about open seats are decided by the Michigan Chamber's PAC Board of Directors. That PAC Board of Directors are our most experienced and successful and capable volunteer leaders. It consists only of the past chairs of our Board of Directors. So men and women from different walks of life and different parts of the state. That's how we evaluate open seats. I want to use as an example of how our process works, and many business organizations have similar processes. There might be some that are different. There are some groups that are going to evaluate you based on whether they like the tie you're wearing or, did the interview go well. We try to have a multi-step process so you learn about people over time. As you're aware, there are currently openings in the State House in the 80th District, which is primarily Allegan County, and in the 82nd District, primarily Lapeer County. When you look at Democrats and Republicans, there are 8 Republicans and 1 Democrat for 9 candidates. All 9 candidates received questionnaires from the Michigan Chamber. 5 chose to return those questionnaires. There were significant differences between how the candidates responded to the questionnaire on substantive issues. We were able, as a result of the candidate questionnaires, to narrow it down to 2 candidates who really appeared to be stronger and more effective and more supportive of Michigan's job providers. We then went to the interview process. In the 82nd District, 14 candidates, 7 returned questionnaires. It was our view that the 2 former lawmakers in those seats had disqualified themselves for consideration due to a lack of a productive voting record and the fact that they both were engaged in inappropriate and unprofessional behavior. And so every candidate except the 2 former lawmakers had an equal opportunity to participate in our process. In both of the races, we have met with the people who appeared to be the better, stronger candidates, and we made our endorsement decisions. One of the things that I think separates the Michigan Chamber from others is that whenever possible, we try to emphasize the positive about the background, the experience, the qualification, the position of the key issues for the candidates that we support. When we announced our endorsement for Murray Whitford in the 80th District, what I said was Mary Whitford will be a strong supporter of job creation and economic growth, and we are pleased to endorse her in this special election. The residents of Allegan County deserve better representation. We believe Whitford possesses the experience and the strength of character necessary to serve the 80th District well. You'll notice we didn't say anything negative about the other candidates, especially when we're looking at primary elections. One of the things I would share with you as a fellow conservative is that we believe it's very important that we don't look at a competitive primary, which can be a good thing, and turn it into a fist fight, a slugfest, so that we turn safe districts into swing seats, or that the candidate that wins the primary is so bloodied and battered and bruised that they cannot win in November. We're looking for practical problem solvers. I believe, with almost 35 years of experience now, you can be a principled conservative. You can represent your district well. We never ask a member of the legislature to vote against their district or to compromise their principles. On the other hand, I would share with you that we don't get to work on very many perfect bills. the legislative process, by its very nature, with a bicameral legislature, majorities and majorities, is a process of give and take. And so we think it's very important that we continue to send people to Lansing and to Washington, D.C., who are principled conservatives. At the Michigan Chamber, we always look for the most conservative candidate who can win in both August and November, and someone who wants to be an effective lawmaker, someone who will be supportive of Michigan's job providers. Those are the things that we're thinking about as we evaluate candidates. In the race in the 82nd District, you'll see the same thing. When we announced our endorsement of Gary Howell, again, we emphasized the positive as his background and experience. There are other good people in both of these races, and we're very respectful of that. In the end, these decisions are to be made by the voters in Allegan and Lapeer counties, and as I indicated earlier, people of goodwill can look at candidates and look at important public policy issues and reach different conclusions. If you are committed as a conservative to be involved in the legislative and the political process over time, sometimes you're going to be in the majority and set the agenda. Sometimes you're going to be in the minority and be responding to the agenda of others. Sometimes you will win, and we work hard to win in the races and on the issues we're involved in, but you're not going to win them all. You've got to take the long view there and to move forward together. So that's a little bit about how at the Michigan Chamber, as a conservative statewide organization, we approach the legislative and the political process. Again, I want to thank you for the invitation today.
I'm Glenn Frobel from Hillsdale County. Why is Tom Donahue at the National Chamber and many state chambers so hell-bent on open borders, needing illegal aliens to drive down wages? With over 90 million Americans out of work, do we really need them? And you talked about playing hard and playing to win. Who's winning, and are we even playing?
Thanks for asking that question. Tom Donahue is a strong advocate for America's job providers, and I've received this question in the past from fellow conservatives and business people as well. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the Michigan Chamber and the U.S. Chamber's position on immigration. The fact is that the U.S. Chamber has not been in favor of amnesty, and our view is that immigration, legal immigration, is what has made America and Michigan great. I'm here this morning to talk about the Michigan Chamber, and as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Chamber is a separate and independent organization. We are a member. We do agree with the U.S. Chamber on many issues, but I think in the news media, especially on radio talk shows, and a lot of the information on the internet these days is simply not a fair or an accurate or a complete description of the U.S. Chamber's position. I've done my very best to verify that personally. Bruce Johnston, the chief lobbyist of the Michigan or U.S. Chamber, has shared with me his testimony on this issue. They are simply not in favor of amnesty or open borders. I do believe in Congress, more members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are starting to understand that the first thing we have to do is to secure our borders. That's one of the criteria for being a sovereign country. So I have tried to set the record straight in terms of the U.S. Chamber. At the Michigan Chamber, we did not support legislation in previous sessions that would have taken immigration policy, which is a federal issue, to the state level. And you do not want Michigan's job providers to become immigration police. We did not support earlier versions that would have required state-level employers to play a greater role in enforcing federal immigration laws. Our members are at their best when they're manufacturing and when they're providing services. They're not police. One of the things that's changed, and I think it's a positive development, is that the new versions of the E-Verify system are more accurate. And so again, the business community's thinking there has evolved. One thing that we feel strongly about is you travel around the state, there are people who manage to get themselves elected to city council who want to legislate on federal issues, want to become sanctuary cities. Our view at the Michigan Chamber is if you want to legislate on federal issues, run for Congress. Don't run for city council or school board. And so I think we're sorting that out. And again, I would be glad to speak with you in more detail after the meeting, but thank you, sir.
Sure. One more thing, when you're thanking people for right to work, thank Bob King for overplaying his hand.
I did tell the governor during the middle of the debate that if we prevail, the law should be the Bob King Memorial Right to Work. As labor leaders will often do, they overreacted to Indiana becoming a right to work state. The governor was neutral on right to work until they forced a debate and then lost. So sometimes in politics, the real lesson is be careful what you wish for. They may do that again this year as we look at the possibility in 2016 of 4, 5, or 6 anti-taxpayer, anti-business ballot proposals driven by groups, many out-of-state groups with national agendas, who parachute people and money into Michigan to put proposals on the ballot.
My question is about the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the MEDC. And some conservatives have questioned whether or not the state government should be funding something like that. And I was curious, and I'm aware that they did take a hit in their budget and had to lay some people off. What is the Chamber of Commerce position on that, and also on the work that they do, and if they're have a value, or would you support completely eliminating it?
The question was, what is our view of the role of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation? As a conservative organization, when we look at tax policy, the best tax policy is broad base, low rate. During the previous administration, we did not support many of the industry-specific and even company-specific tax breaks that were made available, often not to current companies located here, but to companies we might attract from other states. The previous administration spent a lot of time chasing smokestacks and the flavor of the month in terms of economic development. We work very closely with our friends at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. They are a great idea factory. We use a lot of that information and ideas as the bullets we shoot at bad ideas. At the Michigan Chamber, we were very outspoken in our support for legislation to eliminate the costly and ineffective Hollywood film subsidy. Other business groups did not agree with the Michigan Chamber on that, and again, we're respectful, but with the Mackinac Center and the Michigan Chamber, we elected conservative lawmakers who said, you know, this pilot project may have been a good idea, but the MEDC produced a report in 2013 which said they had spent millions in 2012 and not created a single permanent job here in Michigan. And most of that money went to Hollywood film producers and movie stars that don't live and work in Michigan. So when we look at the MEDC, the Pure Michigan program is a wonderful program. It has a positive return on investment. I know it's working because when I travel to other states now, one of the first things other chamber executives will say to me is, will you stop running those damn ads in our state? So we know that's working. We've got to evaluate each of these programs. There is a role for the MEDC, but our approach is that it should be limited. We should not engage in unilateral disarmament, but we've got to evaluate programs on a case-by-case basis. So Pure Michigan, worthwhile and productive, promotes an industry, unlike the film industry, where we have an inherent natural advantage because of the Great Lakes, because of agribusiness and travel and tourism. We were never going to be successful in an arms race with New York and Louisiana and California in building an indigenous film industry. So we've got to pick and choose. I think the MEDC does need to operate with more accountability, more openness, and more transparency. We support the current administration on many issues, but we've been candid about that. There's some things they do well, there's some things they do poorly. When we do something poorly, we have to stop. And so that's how we're approaching that issue.